Another Verstappen victory, an iconic podium and points for Williams. It wasn't the greatest Canadian Grand Prix, but these are my thoughts on the race in Montreal. My name is Aaron. Welcome back to AXGP, everybody. And I'm going to take you through my instant reaction. It's not instant as in right now when I'm recording, but the notes that are on my notepad are fairly instant. It was within about half an hour of the race finishing. So, welcome back. If you are new to the channel, subscribe for lots of Grand Prix content. If you're returning, thanks for coming back. Make sure you like the video and share it with other people. If you're listening on audio on the podcast, share it as well. And make sure you follow on all podcast platforms so you can listen to me talk about Formula One, IndyCar, Formula E, loads of stuff, and a bit of Formula 2 as well. So we'll start with rating the Canadian Grand Prix. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. It wasn't terrible. There were some stories within it that we're going to get into in a moment, but it wasn't the Canadian Grand Prix that I grew up looking forward to. And I was discussing this with my wife yesterday, and the conclusion that I've come to is mistakes happened in the mid-2000s around Canada. So if you think about Lewis Hamilton's first win in 2007 and Robert Kubica's win in 2008, those were littered with errors and safety cars and just weird stuff happening and crazy accidents. But they were also in the refueling era. So the cars were being thrashed around super hard, and there were lively cars. They were very oversteery. The groove tyres not as grippy. So they were really attacking all of the curbs and the corners, and it caused accidents. You know, you get the final chicane wrong and you'd be in the champion's wall. And obviously technology has come a long way since then, so suspension has become stronger. But also the shape of the cars, they're so much bigger and heavier, so you can't go side by side so easily. They're not attacking the corners as aggressively, like in terms of the dynamics of the car. They're not as nimble, so it's not going to spit you out if you get a corner wrong, if you hit the curb too much. Although it can, as we saw George Russell do exactly that on lap 12. So the perils are still there, but I just don't think they're going to be as common, because the drivers aren't thrashing the car around as much. And also potentially this could be a slightly controversial take. Maybe the quality of the driving is much higher now. So back in the mid-2000s, we had some drivers who were decent, decent backmarker drivers. Adrian Sutil was in a four-cylinder? Was it a Spiker back then? They changed their names so regularly in that period. It's hard to remember which one they were. What is the Aston Martin team? He was good for throwing it in the wall, I think. I think that was 2008. Yeah. I mean, those two races, so much happened within them. It's hard to pick out an incident which happened in one specifically, generally. Unless you're talking about the Kubica crash where he launched through the air and ripped all the wheels off the thing. But, you just don't see that anymore. And it's such a shame, because it's such a racy circuit and there's so many things that can go wrong, but there's so much reward for it. And, Lando Norris, I've got a note down here. He was pretty much the only driver making proper overtakes. So, there was a lot of DRS assisted overtakes, but that's the name of the game, I suppose, now. And the name of the game is winning for Max Verstappen. He wins again. Red Bull have now got 100 victories in Formula One Grand Prix. I mean, I've said it before, I'll say it again. I'm not a Red Bull fan. I don't like the way a few of their personnel conduct themselves. It's all hunky-dory at the moment because they've got a cushion back to everybody else. When they get some competition, we might see that change again. And I think Verstappen needs to change a few bits about his driving in combat. But we've covered that ground before. But it's an amazing achievement for Red Bull. At the start they were declared just a fizzy drinks company, but they're much more than that now. They're now an established Formula One team. They're now an engine-ish manufacturer. They're going to be in 2026. But they're one of the big boys. They are up there with Williams and Ferrari and McLaren and Mercedes, who have also got more than 100 victories in Formula One. And, McLaren do the road car sort of thing, but I suppose the one you could compare Red Bull with is Williams, because that was a privateer team, still is, obviously run for decades by Sir Frank Williams, and then the Williams family after he sort of stepped back a bit more. And they're kind of back on the up, but Red Bull are kind of more like that, aren't they? Ferrari, obviously, with all the basically the force of Italy behind it. Mercedes are a global car brand. So an outstanding achievement. So to all the men and women who have worked on Red Bull's cars over the years, that's something for them to say, I was part of that. And that's the hidden story behind Formula One. We see the drivers and the team bosses, and we pick favourites, and some of them do and say things that some of us don't like, and we have our favourite teams and favourite drivers and our favourite circuits, but behind all of the teams are just normal people like you and me going about their jobs, and they get this amazing job. They get to build Formula One cars and make them go racing. If you're one of those people, congratulations on being part of that journey for Red Bull. And also for David Coulthard, who in my childhood was my favourite driver. He helped start the Red Bull team. Without him, they may not have got to where they are, because he helped convince Adrian Newey to join the team. If DC had retired at the end of 2004, then perhaps Adrian Newey wouldn't have gone there. Maybe he'd have stayed at McLaren. Maybe he would have gone to Ferrari. Perhaps he'd have gone back to Williams. Or when Mercedes arrived in 2010, they would have pinched him, and they would have had even more success because they'd have built a faster car sooner. So, it's all alternate universe stuff, but we're in the here and now. Verstappen equaling Ayrton Senna's record of 41 victories. That's a brilliant milestone in itself for him. Red Bull with 100 victories. Well done to them. And we had an iconic podium again. Verstappen, Alonso, Hamilton. Was there really ever a fight for victory? I don't think so. Alonso felt he could have challenged a bit more. I think Verstappen always had pace in hand. That was a radio message that kind of was a dagger to the hearts of anybody who was hoping for a race for the victory when GP came on to Verstappen and said, there's a race behind you, but I don't think you're pushing as much as other people. So, when you've got that luxury, you don't need to push. You just need to get to the finish. And it's like Jackie Stewart said, win the race in the slowest time possible. Look after the car. And these cars are pretty bulletproof, which, you can say is magnificent engineering, but also takes that sort of random jeopardy out of things. They're so reliable now. It's almost like, well, Verstappen's got to make a mistake to lose victory, or it's going to be a really rare occurrence of unreliability. Ferrari set the standard in the early 2000s, and everyone's met that and just taken the game on a bit more. So, it's great to see these feats of engineering, but I think we are at a point where we're too reliable now in Formula One. I mean, let me know what you think of that. Is there enough engines going bang? Could we go back to the big smoky blowouts of the yesteryear, the V10 era? Probably not with V10, probably not with V6s, because they just don't work like that. But I think maybe we are too reliable now on Formula One cars. And that Alonso-Hamilton fight for second was quite interesting. Hamilton obviously making a great start. He's probably, I would say, the best starter in the field. And normally I would have said Alonso is, but Alonso's starts this year haven't been what I'd have expected, because historically he was a fabulous starter. If you look, we've all seen the onboards of him charging from P4 in Spain to take the lead and leaping off the line. Back in the Renault days, they had this insane launch system when you could have the launch control, and they'd make up 4 or 5 places on the grid. I think in Canada in 2005 he went from 3rd to the lead or something. He just blasted past, I think it was Button and Schumacher on the front row. So he's always had this reputation, but Hamilton actually I would say, makes consistently better starts. In 2016, of course, he generally didn't make good starts, and I think this is another thing that Lewis has learned to do and perfected over the years. Is make sure get good consistent starts, and that got him track position early on over Alonso. He probably wasn't. Well, we know he wasn't the faster of the two, and once Alonso got close enough with DRS, he got through, pulled away. But there's not much to choose between Aston and Mercedes. I think we're going to see it flip-flop depending on upgrades and track suitability. Mercedes said this wasn't really a track for them, but to come away with a podium was good for them. Alonso said that this would the last race in Spain would be the last race without a podium, which is a pretty bold statement considering Ferrari and Mercedes and Red Bull are super competitive, and both Red Bulls get their act together and do the job properly. Looking your way, Checo Perez, there's only one spot available on the podium, and if Aston aren't having a super competitive weekend or there's unreliability, then podiums will go missing for Fernando, unfortunately. But it was a nice fight. It does worry me when, as a Hamilton supporter, having Alonso behind him. I always feel Alonso's on the verge of doing something silly, but there's respect between them. They have a rivalry on the track. There's a historic rivalry. You couldn't possibly put them in the same team together. I just don't think it would ever work. It would be nicey nice for about 5 minutes, but yeah, I mean, it does concern me that they're going to come together like they did in Spa last year, and then there's going to be comments made and fingers pointed. And I just think they're both above that now because they almost supersede the sport in different ways. Obviously, Hamilton with his personality off the track and the causes he champions, and obviously Alonso for his racer spirit. It's just like it's on another level to almost anybody else on the grid. And behind that fight actually came the Ferraris. And on my notes here, you might see it on my Instagram, which you can find a link to in the show notes below. Ferrari actually did a strategy. They actually pulled one off. It worked. So, starting 10th and 11th after an utterly miserable Saturday in which Leclerc failed to get out of Q2, failing to make Q3 for the second race in a row, Sainz got a 3-place grid penalty for impeding on Gasly. But to be fair, he'd been impeding people at the final corner all day. Really, he should have had about 12 places of grid penalties. Let's be honest about that. Ferrari pulled a bit of a blinder on strategy. They gambled on staying out when the safety car came out for Russell's accident on lap 12, but it was really a smart decision because I remember if you haven't been watching Formula One so long, there was a race back in 2008 where Nelson Piquet Jr., before he was on purpose throwing things at the wall, he finished second in Hockenheim, having started like 17th on the grid, and they ran a one-stop strategy on the basis of if you do the same as everybody else, you'll just pretty much end up where you started. So Ferrari stayed out and gave themselves track position, banking on having the pace to pull away, and it worked beautifully for them. They got themselves back up to 4th and 5th, which is probably where they would naturally have ended up anyway. And if they'd started a bit higher up, maybe they could have run a different strategy and competed a bit more with Alonso and Hamilton. But that's ifs, buts, and maybes. So it's a step in the right direction, and Leclerc has called Ferrari out in saying that they need to do a better job. They're making life difficult for themselves with these strategy balls ups, and I mean the writing's been on the wall for ages that Ferrari need to do a better job on strategy, and they need to be more authoritative with the drivers, or the drivers need to be listened to. I think it's all a bit too open because we heard in qualifying Leclerc saying we should do slicks, but Ferrari said no, let's do the lap, and it ended up costing them because Leclerc didn't get his slick lap in time, while or he didn't get a good enough slick lap in the end because they missed the boat. And you can say that Hamilton didn't, but he was fortunate in that he'd done a good enough inters lap to get by. So Ferrari do need to do a better job, but Sunday was a step in the right direction in terms of that. But they didn't stand out quite as much as Alex Albon and Williams. And he was my tip for the weekend, really. I said in my 5 things that would definitely happen, he would start and finish in the top 10. He started 9th. He topped Q2 for crying out loud, because Williams and Alex were the only team to go straight to slicks. And it worked. They were able to get the temperature in. He topped the session ahead of Verstappen. And I mean, Verstappen was, 3/10 slower in Q2? Because he'd done a lap on the inters. I can't remember if he came straight in or not. But still, Albon did a brilliant job this weekend. And it would have been great even if he'd finished 10th. But he finished 7th. And he held off an angry train, including Ocon, Bottas, the 2 McLarens, and Lance Stroll. He did unbelievable work. He managed those hard tyres from, I think, lap 12 and lap 17 once they restarted under the safety car. So that's 50 odd laps. Another tyre preservation, position defending masterclass from Alex Albon. Just superb. And if you're listening to this, my thumbnail says Alexander the Great. I mean, let's be honest, he is the hero of Williams racing right now. He's doing George Russell-esque drives in qualifying. He's putting it together on race day when he can. And even when he's not finishing in the points, he's doing a super duper job for that team. And if they don't finish bottom, it'll all be down to Alex Albon. There'll be opportunities where Logan Sargent can pick up a point or two here, but they've really got to make hay while they can. Because AlphaTauri, the team that are now bottom of the table, aside from Tsunoda, don't look like scoring points. And Tsunoda is sniping off the odd point here and there when he can. And I think Williams are going to have more opportunities to score points because they're so good down the straights. There's a lot of circuits that are coming up that will favour that. Austria, maybe not so much Silverstone because of the fast corners, but if they get track position, they might be able to just hang on. You never know. Spa, they'll do well. Monza, they'll do well. I'm not sure where AlphaTauri will do well. Vegas, with its massively long straight, perhaps Albon will be in for some more points on a street-style circuit again. But Albon was fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. And the smiles on his face, on the team's face, just absolutely lovely to see. Because, as I've said, Williams is a great team. They've got 100 victories. And to see them coming back from those dark days in 2019 where the car was just... you might as well have put an F2 car out. It would have, for all the good it would have done. Just so good to see. I mentioned him at the beginning. Lando Norris, 2 superb overtakes. Probably the only 2 bona fide overtakes, pure overtakes. I know one of them into turn 1 was DRS assisted, but the couple of dive bombs into the hairpin, very nice. The one, I think it was Kevin Magnussen. It was definitely one of the Hasses. I can't remember which one it was. It might have been Hulkenberg, in fact, because obviously Hulk started in 5th. He would have started 2nd if he'd done the right speed behind under red flags. And that, just to divert a minute, unbelievable lap in terms of its timing and actually getting it in. Hulk, we know, is a bit of a wet weather specialist. He tends to go very well. He was set for a podium back in 2019 in Germany before he threw it at the wall because he's scared of the podium, apparently. But yeah, back to Lando. A great pair of overtakes. Hulkenberg, great qualifying lap. I think I've covered both of them off there. Lance Stroll. Let's talk about Lance Stroll. This isn't going well, is it? Because you've got Fernando Alonso putting the Aston Martin on the podium on a regular basis. You've got Lance Stroll not doing that, or not even getting close to it. If he was finishing 5th, 6th, that region, every sort of race, you could go, well, yeah, he's not quite reaching Alonso levels, but that's not what we'd expect because Alonso's a bit of a freak in that concept in that way, and Stroll just isn't. He's not Fernando. He's not a world champion. As much as Fernando Alonso wants to say he is, he's not going to be a world champion. So it's even worse when he's qualifying in Q2 and being eliminated, and then scraping points on like the last lap. He snatched P10 from Bottas, and only getting P9 because Lando Norris got a penalty. He's really letting the team down, and there will come a moment where Lawrence Stroll has to make a decision, because if he wants Aston Martin to win world championships, he can't do it if Lance is performing like this. And we're seeing it with Checo Perez. Even in the best car, certain types of driver are needed. You look at Verstappen, Hamilton, Alonso when he had a great car, very, very good. Schumacher, Senna, Prost, they were all able to extract the maximum out of the car, and they were able to elevate their level to another level to meet the car and just drag themselves away from their teammates. You know, Valtteri Bottas is by no means a bad Grand Prix driver. He was acceptably good at Mercedes. He was just up against an all-time great as the construction team outside make a whole load of noise. So, you know, Lance needs to get his act together, and he's only 24, let's be honest. But he's been in Formula One for a long time. There's an amount that he would have already learned. There's an amount that he still needs to perfect. So Stroll needs to do a lot of work to get closer to Alonso. But whether that's the car needs to be significantly better or Stroll needs to be significantly better is probably about equal. And there's going to come a day where Lawrence Stroll has to make a choice. Is this team about giving his son a seat in F1, or is this team about him producing and owning a world championship winning team and brand? You know, he wants to have his cake and eat it, but I just don't think that's going to happen. Now, talking about things that did happen, my 5 things that definitely would happen in the Canadian Grand Prix, let's have a look at those. So my first call was that Red Bull would qualify on the front row with both cars, and I got halfway there because Verstappen was on the pole position, but Checo Perez decided he wanted to be not P2, he wanted to be P12 instead. So that failed. Mercedes beating Aston Martin and Ferrari with both cars. That didn't happen because George Russell threw it at the wall and Alonso was there still. So that didn't happen. But, as I've mentioned already, Alex Albon did start and finish in the top 10. So that's 1 out of 3 so far. Esteban Ocon to beat Pierre Gasly in qualifying and in the race. And thanks to Carlos Sainz's help, that happened. So that's 2 out of 4 so far with 50%. And Lance Stroll would get points. So I know I've just, caned him a little bit for not being good enough. But he did make my prediction come true. So 3 out of 5 there. And then my overall predictions from my video on Friday. Max Verstappen for pole position. Slam dunk, really. Max Verstappen to win the race. Again, so easy. I'll tell you now, Max Verstappen's going to win the Austrian Grand Prix and the British Grand Prix and the Grand Prix after that. I've forgotten which one it is. It might be Belgium, I think. Then or Hungary and then Belgium and probably then Monza and Holland and all of them. Yeah, Max Verstappen's going to win all of the races. Second place, my pick was Perez because I thought he'd start at the front and Red Bull would have the fastest car, but he didn't. On Perez, I was disappointed with his recovery only to P6. I think he's just in a whole mess at the moment. It's really not working out for Checo. And then for third place, I went for Lewis Hamilton, which did come in. So 3 out of 4 in the predictions video because that pesky Alonso got second place. So they are my thoughts on the Canadian Grand Prix. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you're listening on audio, you can tweet me at AHGPPod or at AaronHarper41. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, all of that stuff, share it. You know what to do. Check out my other videos as well. I'm going to be trying to do some more of those different videos, a bit more exploratory stuff. So I want to look at Alex Palou in IndyCar because he's had an absolutely unbelievable last 4 races, winning 3 out of 4, having when we'd had 5 different winners in a row. So IndyCar, really super competitive, but Alex Palou also being the man out there. And maybe he's the Spaniard that Formula One needs next. So maybe that's the avenue I'll take with that. Driver ratings will come out later on this week, so look out for that. And you can also find me on the F2 show from time to time, where I talk about Formula 2 and F1's next generation of talent. Not just F1, because, as I've just mentioned, IndyCar super competitive, but Marcus Armstrong, Christian Lundgaard, Callum Eilert, all gone out there as ex-Formula 2 drivers and doing super, super well in IndyCar. Formula E watch-alongs, they probably won't be returning next weekend because the Grand Prix of the E Prix in Portland is at 1 a.m. UK time. So what I'll probably do is a not live watch-along or something to that effect. So I'll set something up for like the Sunday morning or something and just watch it back. So if you want to join me for that, come and join me for that. You'll have to set your stream up to do so. So I'll put a start point in the stream and we'll see where we go from there. But that's all for now. I think I've waffled on just enough to bore you all to death. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for sticking with me if you got this far. If you did get this far on the video, just comment who your driver of the day was or something, with the hashtag, I don't know, AHGP driver, something like that. Anyway, that'll do. I'll be quiet now. Bye.